The first thing I noticed was her fingernails. Crimson red. Garnet, to be exact, Harlan's favorite color. I only knew that because he once went on a 5-minute monologue about how it reminded him of a cherry Mustang he used to dream about owning as a teenager. Tessa laughed so hard she cried that night. That was 2 months ago. I'd asked her what color I should paint the kitchen cabinets, and she barely grunted. But her nails were garnet. She walked into my parents' house like she was gliding. Perfect hair, long black coat, boots that clicked with authority. She didn't scan the room, didn't hesitate. She went right to Harlan. I was setting out forks. My hand literally paused over the cutlery drawer, frozen midair, while she walked up to him with the kind of body language you'd expect from someone greeting a returning soldier. Not her brother-in-law. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and pretended not to. Her arm slid around his back. His arm went lower than it should have. Then came the part that hit like a thunderclap wrapped in silk. She whispered something into his ear and giggled. Giggled. The kind of giggle she used to save for when I made her milkshakes at 2 a.m. or read her bad Yelp reviews in a dramatic voice. They were standing 5 feet from me. And still, no eye contact. No smile. No kiss hello. Not even a nod. Eventually, she brushed past me, shoulder grazing mine with all the warmth of a door hinge. She mumbled, "Hey, Corbin," as if saying my name was an obligation she had to check off before joining the real party, which, apparently, was wherever Harlan stood. Dinner was a funeral in slow motion. She didn't sit next to me. She didn't compliment the food. She didn't notice I shaved. But she did refill Harlan's glass twice, laugh at everything he said, and this is the part that broke something inside me. She fed him a piece of bread. She tore it off, dipped it into the olive oil, and held it up like a peace offering. He opened his mouth. She placed it in. Their eyes locked. I dropped my fork. No one noticed. Except my niece, Margot. She's 6. She looked at me like I was about to cry. I think I was. And you know what? I couldn't even be mad at Harlan. That's the worst part. He's always been the golden boy. The younger, cooler, hotter brother. Played guitar. Had abs. Once got a standing ovation during a best man speech. Of course, she gravitated toward him. Of course she did. But she was my wife. And she didn't even kiss me hello. She gave him a hug. She gave him a caress. And me? She gave me silence. The next morning, I woke up before her. I don't know if I really slept. My eyes were closed. But my brain was a floodlight burning through every little thing I saw the night before. My mind kept looping the moment she pulled the crust off that bread and gave it to Harlan like he was some Roman emperor being doted on by his favorite courtesan. I lay there next to her, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly she stopped choosing me. She stirred around 7:12, like always. She didn't say good morning. Just groaned, pulled on her robe, and shuffled to the bathroom. When she passed me, I caught the scent of something that made me freeze. A cologne. Not perfume. Cologne. Woodsy, musky, sharp. Not mine. Not even close. It smelled expensive, and I sure as hell hadn't worn anything but the same discount body spray for 6 years. I sat up slowly, my mouth already dry. Could she have hugged Harlan that close? That long? Could that smell have rubbed off on her? Or did it happen somewhere else? Some other moment I wasn't supposed to know about? I didn't ask. Not yet. But I started watching. That's the thing they don't tell you about betrayal. It doesn't hit you like a car crash. It drips in, slow, subtle, poisoning your trust drop by drop. That day, she was suddenly humming in the kitchen. She hadn't hummed in months. Not even when she cooked. Not even on her birthday. But there she was, flipping eggs and humming like her soul was freshly ironed. She made me a plate, kissed my cheek, and that almost broke me. It was the first time she kissed me in 5 days, and it felt like pity. Not love. I chewed in silence while she talked about her book club meeting that night. All girls, she said. I nodded like a mannequin. I didn't believe her. By noon, she was gone. Said she'd meet the girls at this little place called Marla's Cafe. I decided not to confront her. Not yet. I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I followed her. I didn't plan it. I just did it. I waited 10 minutes, grabbed my keys, and drove like a coward 2 cars behind her. I felt sick the entire time. I didn't want to be right. God, I hoped I was wrong. I prayed I'd see her laughing with 3 women over overpriced muffins and chai lattes, and then I could go home and call myself a paranoid idiot. But she never went to Marla's. She drove past it and kept driving. And 20 minutes later, She pulled into a neighborhood I didn't recognize, some newly developed part of town with modern homes and sterile streets. She parked her car, walked up to a door like she'd done it 100 times before, knocked once, and Harlan answered. I swear, my lungs stopped working. She smiled at him. He smiled at her. Then they both went inside, and the door shut quietly behind them. I sat there, knuckles white on the steering wheel, and my ears started ringing. Maybe they were talking. Maybe she was dropping off something. Maybe it was innocent. But if it was innocent, why did she lie? Why say girls' night? If it was just a visit to my brother? Why did they both look so at ease? The worst part is, I didn't get out. I didn't march up to the door. I didn't knock. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just drove home, my seatbelt choking me more than protecting me, and told myself I needed more proof. That I wasn't ready. That maybe, just maybe, there was another explanation. But I don't believe that anymore. And I think the next thing I'm about to do will finally tell me the truth. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. When she came home, she was glowing. Not just in a good evening way. It was the kind of glow someone wears when they've gotten away with something, or when they've been reminded, even briefly, that they still matter to someone. I watched her from the couch while she kicked off her shoes and poured herself a glass of wine. She told me that Lacey from book club was going through it again, and that, honestly, they didn't even talk about the book. I nodded and smiled like the perfect idiot I've trained myself to be. She sat next to me, curled her legs up, and leaned her head against my shoulder. I used to love that feeling, but this time it made my skin crawl. Because now, I wasn't sure whose shoulder she wanted this to be. I barely slept. Again, around 2 a.m., when I was sure she was out cold, I slid out of bed and walked around our house like a ghost. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Framed wedding photos, her fuzzy socks by the laundry, half-finished yogurt in the fridge with her name on the lid. But it all felt staged. Like a movie set designed to make me think this was still my life. I ended up in the guest room. The one we never use. The one she told me she sometimes naps in on the weekends because the sunlight is better there. And I don't know why I opened the nightstand drawer. I really don't. Maybe I was hoping to be proven wrong. Maybe I thought I'd find nothing and finally breathe. But I did find something. 2 things, actually. The first was her gold bracelet, the one I gave her on our 3rd anniversary. The one she told me she misplaced 6 months ago and stopped caring about. It was tucked into the back of the drawer, beneath a folded gray hoodie I didn't recognize. It wasn't mine. It smelled faintly of pine wood and bourbon, Harlan's scent. I knew it instantly. That specific blend of aftershave and arrogance. I sat on the edge of the guest bed holding the bracelet in my hand, and it felt heavier than I remembered. My brain was screaming again, but this time I didn't cry. I just sat there, numbly listening to the faint sound of her breathing through the thin wall between the rooms. I imagined her wrapped in our sheets, dreaming about someone else's warmth, wearing my ring like it meant nothing anymore. The second thing I found was worse. A small, torn piece of receipt from a local hotel. Not a full bill, just a stub. Room 213. Paid in cash. 2 days ago. That same day she worked late because her boss dumped a last-minute project on her. I folded it and tucked it back where I found it. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to give her a chance to hide it herself, so I could watch her squirm. Or maybe I was still hoping, deep down in whatever part of me still stupidly loved her, that she'd confess on her own. When I climbed back into bed, she instinctively turned toward me and whispered, half asleep, "Did you take out the trash?" I didn't answer, because something far worse than trash had been thrown away me. And I think she knew that. I didn't speak to her for 2 days. Not in any meaningful way. We exchanged the usual grunts and generic phrases, coffees on the counter. "Did you move my keys?" But it was all autopilot. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Either way, she moved through the house like nothing was wrong, like our marriage wasn't rotting quietly beneath the floorboards. I started watching everything. Her posture, the way her phone never left her side, how she turned it over screen down every time she set it on a surface, how she locked it even when she went to the bathroom. She never used to do that. On Thursday evening, I found myself alone in the garage. I'd gone in there under the pretense of fixing a loose shelf, but the truth is I just couldn't stand to be in the same room with her while she watched some show she claimed to love but never laughed at anymore. I sat on the workbench and stared at a screwdriver for 10 minutes, wondering what was left in me that hadn't been hollowed out. That's when I remembered something strange from the night before. Her phone had buzzed while we were watching TV. She'd jumped, not visibly, but just enough. A quick grab, a flick of her thumb, and then silence. She didn't open the message in front of me. Said it was nothing important. But I remembered the app. It was one we both used. VoxMe, a walkie-talkie voice messaging thing she made me download during the pandemic because she said texting felt too cold. She never used it anymore. Or so I thought. I still had it on my phone. And because we'd linked accounts a year ago to share files for some dumb anniversary video she never finished, I opened it, just to see if maybe she'd accidentally left something synced. There was one message. From H. It was 3 days old. Unopened. I should have just deleted the app. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I played it. And the sound that filled the garage made my blood go cold. It was him. Harlan. His voice was unmistakable. Casual. Too casual. He sounded like he was smiling through his teeth. Hey, just making sure you didn't forget the excuse you gave him about Friday. I'm not trying to cover for both of us if he shows up somewhere unexpected. Text me before you leave your place, all right? No names. No places. Just confirmation. I stood there, replaying it over and over. My ears burned. My hands shook. It wasn't just the content, it was the tone. That calm, almost cocky tone. Like this wasn't the first time they'd done this. Like this was routine. I didn't tell her I'd heard it. I didn't tell her anything. I just sat there in the dark, listening to my brother's voice echo through a cracked speaker, confirming the thing I'd been gaslighting myself about for weeks. She was lying. He was helping. And I was the idiot rebuilding shells while my life disintegrated around me. When I went back inside, she looked up from her laptop and smiled. You okay? She asked, not even pretending to mean it. I smiled back. I nodded. And in that moment, I decided something I didn't think I was capable of anymore. I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to catch her. And then, I was going to disappear so thoroughly that she'd feel my absence every time she tried to justify her choices. The next day, I woke up before she did again. I watched her sleep for a moment, not out of affection, but out of confusion. How could someone look so peaceful while hiding something so toxic? Her breathing was soft, her hands tucked under the pillow like a child. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed we were still us, the couple who danced barefoot in the kitchen and left each other notes under coffee mugs. But that version of her no longer existed. She'd buried him, the me she once loved, without ever giving him a eulogy. I spent the morning pretending to check emails, pretending to scroll through sports news I didn't care about, pretending to be okay. She left for work around 8:30. Said she'd probably stay late again, depending on the meeting with Janice. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and watched her drive off like it was a normal Tuesday. It wasn't. Because today was the day I started keeping score. I'd never been the type to spy. I always thought those guys were pathetic, the ones who checked their wife's texts or followed her after work like bad detectives. I always believed that if you had to check, the relationship was already dead. But guess what? Ours was already a corpse. I was just now brave enough to look at the autopsy. I went to the hallway closet and pulled out the small digital nanny cam we'd used 2 years ago when her nephew came to stay with us for a week. Still functional. Still synced to my phone. I installed it inside a vent grill in the guest room, the one where I'd found her bracelet and the hoodie that wasn't mine. It had a perfect view of the bed, the door, and the nightstand. I told myself I just needed confirmation. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind. A moment that would give me permission to stop forgiving her in my head. Then I went to do laundry. That's where I noticed something else, something new. A shirt was missing. It wasn't one I wore often. A forest green long-sleeve button-down she once said made me look accidentally hot. I only wore it on vacations and date nights. I hadn't touched it in months. But it wasn't in the closet. Wasn't in the hamper. Wasn't in the drawers. I even checked under the bed like some desperate man digging for clues to a murder that hadn't been officially declared. Gone. And then it hit me. She wore it once. I remembered now. She had joked about it, said she wanted something cozy and oversized. That was 3 weeks ago, but I hadn't seen it since. And I knew, with gut-splitting certainty, that it wasn't here anymore. I didn't even want to imagine it. My shirt, in Harlan's apartment, draped over the back of a chair. Or worse, balled up in some forgotten corner after being used for something I wasn't supposed to know about. By evening, I'd gone hollow. Numbness is a weird thing. It's not absence of feeling. It's the feeling of everything at once, muffled under 10 feet of concrete. She came home around 9:17 p.m., holding a takeout bag and humming a song that didn't exist in our playlists. I asked her what took so long. She said Janice's meeting ran late and they got food after. She even showed me a selfie of the group, smiling at a table in what looked like a cafe. I didn't say anything, just nodded and offered to warm up her food. I didn't tell her I checked Janice's Instagram 30 minutes earlier and saw her tagged at a wine tasting across town with her husband since 6 p.m. I didn't say a word, because now I was listening more than speaking, observing more than reacting, planning more than forgiving. And when she went into the guest room to fold laundry that didn't exist, I sat in the kitchen, watching the live feed from the hidden camera on my phone. She didn't do anything suspicious that night. But the way she moved, the way she sat on the edge of the bed and smiled at a text she never mentioned, it was enough. The kind of enough that doesn't explode. It just burns. And I wasn't planning to confront her anymore. I was planning to expose everything. On my terms. It happened on a Sunday night. The kind of quiet evening that makes you feel like the world is pretending to be calm right before it erupts. We hadn't fought. We hadn't even spoken much. Tessa spent most of the day in leggings and a loose sweater, scrolling on her phone, occasionally laughing at things she never showed me. I made dinner. She picked at it. We watched 2 episodes of some crime series she used to obsess over, but now barely reacted to. She laughed once, not at the show, but at a message that buzzed in on her phone mid-episode. When I asked what was funny, she said, "Oh, just something Mindy sent me. You wouldn't get it." I wanted to ask if Mindy's contact photo had always been a black screen, but I didn't, because I already knew it wasn't Mindy. That night, after she went to bed claiming a headache, I waited. I sat in the kitchen, pretending to finish my tea, while the live feed from the vent camera loaded on my phone in the background. I wasn't expecting anything major. In fact, part of me had stopped hoping to catch her. I'd been recording for days, and aside from her pacing and scrolling and occasionally doing stretches that seemed oddly performative, there was nothing concrete. No smoking gun. But then she came back into the guest room 15 minutes after going to sleep. Fully dressed. Jeans, hoodie, even makeup redone, subtle but visible. Her hair was brushed out, not messy from bed. She stood in the center of the room and looked nervous. Then she checked her phone, turned toward the nightstand, and tapped on it twice. Like a signal. My heartbeat spiked. That's when something happened I wasn't ready for. She paused, looked up toward the vent, right at the camera. Not vaguely, not coincidentally. Direct eye contact, straight through the lens and into me. And then, she smiled. It wasn't a gotcha smile. It wasn't even cruel. It was worse than that. It was soft, knowing, like she knew I was watching and had been waiting for me to get to this point. Then she walked calmly to the edge of the bed, sat down, took off her shoes, and pulled something out of her bag. My green shirt. The one that had vanished. She pressed it to her face like it was a memory and laid it across the bed. I stared at the screen, paralyzed. I didn't even know what emotion to feel anymore. Confusion? Rage? Sadness? All of them collided inside me like a multi-car pileup. She picked up her phone, typed something, waited, and then stood again. After another 2 minutes, she left the room. 10 minutes later, I heard our front door open, then close. I rushed to the front window. No car. No footsteps. Just silence. She didn't take her purse. Didn't take her keys. Didn't even take her jacket. It was like she wanted me to notice she'd left. Like she wanted me to follow. But I didn't. I went back to the camera feed, and when I rewound it, just to be sure, I saw something else. A second camera. One I didn't place. A tiny red light blinking softly from the opposite corner of the guest room, near the bookshelf we never use. She'd installed her own. She knew. She'd known the whole time. And now I had to ask myself something terrifying. Was I still watching her? Or was she watching me? The key was exactly where I thought it would be. In the old rusted planter beside Harlan's apartment door, hidden under a fake rock I gave him 3 Christmases ago. He'd laughed and said, "You think I'm going to get robbed?" And I said, "One day, you're going to need someone to get in when you're too drunk to find your keys." I didn't know it would be me. I didn't know it would be like this. It was early afternoon. Tessa thought I was at a dental appointment. Harlan was out of town for a business trip he bragged about for 2 weeks, some hotel conference in Oregon, giving a presentation about supply chain automation or some other corporate noise he used to make fun of when we were younger and still believed in music. I waited until both their schedules aligned. I planned it for days. And when I slipped the key into the lock and pushed open the door to his apartment, I swear the air changed. Like the building itself knew I didn't belong. The apartment smelled like him, cedarwood and citrus, that same cologne that clung to Tessa's coat 3 weeks ago. The lights were off, blinds cracked just enough to cast long shadows across the wood floors. It wasn't messy, but it wasn't clean either. Papers on the table, shoes kicked off near the couch, 2 coffee mugs in the sink. 2. Not 1. I moved quietly, like the walls had ears. My heart felt like it had shrunk into my throat. Every step I took felt like trespassing on a life I hadn't been invited to, but one I somehow already knew existed. I didn't touch anything at first. I just observed, took it all in, memorized every detail, like I was building a case that no one would ever hear. Then I found the drawer. Second one down in the bedroom nightstand. Not locked, just slightly wedged shut, like someone had crammed too much into it too fast. My fingers hesitated on the handle. I knew that once I opened it, I couldn't go back. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't keep asking questions I already knew the answers to. But I pulled it open anyway. Inside were folded papers, receipts, and at least 6 photographs. Real ones, not digital. Printed. Glossy. I picked up the first and immediately felt like the floor beneath me had vanished. It was a photo of Tessa, in our backyard, wearing my shirt. She was barefoot, smiling up at the camera, sun in her eyes, middle of summer. Her hair was damp like she'd just stepped out of the shower. But I never took that picture. I never saw her wear that shirt in the yard. I wasn't home. Or worse, maybe I was, and just didn't know she was outside posing for someone else. The next photo was worse. It was a mirror selfie. She was in Harlan's apartment. Same bedroom, same nightstand. Wearing a hoodie I'd never seen before and biting her lip like a teenager. Written on the back in ink, sloppy and crooked, were the words, Tuesday, after he fell asleep. I didn't realize I was shaking until I dropped the photo. The rest were the same, intimate, laughing, legs tangled, her wearing his clothes, him wearing hers. One with both of them on a couch I didn't recognize, wine glasses half full, and what looked like my book in her hand, the one I'd loaned her years ago and never saw again. My copy of the picture of Dorian Gray. She gave it to him. I felt like I couldn't breathe. At the bottom of the drawer, beneath a stack of receipts from restaurants she swore she'd never been to, was a small velvet pouch. Inside it was a ring. Not hers. Not mine. A man's ring. Gold. Thick. Engraved inside with 3 initials I didn't recognize. CDB. I don't know why, but holding that ring made something inside me go silent. Not angry. Not sad. Just done. This wasn't just a betrayal anymore. This wasn't just my wife and my brother sneaking around while I ironed shirts and planned movie nights. This was something else. Something darker. A game I hadn't even realized I was playing, and I'd already lost. I left everything the way I found it. Closed the drawer. Locked the door behind me. Drove home like nothing happened. When Tessa got home 2 hours later, she kissed my cheek again and asked if I wanted sushi. I smiled and said yes, because now I had everything I needed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed beside her, listening to the rhythmic inhale and exhale of the woman I used to know. I stared at the ceiling and imagined all the ways I could end this. The fight, the confrontation, the shouting, the tears. I pictured her denying everything, then admitting just enough to make me feel guilty for asking. I imagined Harlan trying to charm his way out of it, using that same fake humility he'd always gotten away with. I imagined the drama, the pain, the chaos. But I didn't want any of that anymore. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And I knew, finally, fully, that I'd never find peace standing beside people who fed on my silence. The next morning, I got up before the sun rose. I packed a small bag, just the essentials, some clothes, my favorite book, a notebook, my passport. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter, next to a note that simply read, "You can have each other. I'm taking back myself." I didn't wait for her to wake up. I didn't want to see her reaction. I didn't want another lie in my face or some half-tear apology crafted for damage control. I just walked out the door, got in my car, and drove. No music. No phone. Just the sound of the tires eating the road as the sun slowly crept over the horizon. I ended up in a small town 2 hours away. Quiet. Coastal. The kind of place that smells like salt and coffee and old books. I found a room to rent above a used bookstore. Paid cash. The owner didn't ask many questions. I told him I used to write, and he said, "Well, maybe it's time you start again." So I did. That first week, I walked the beach every morning. Just me, the wind, and 1,000 thoughts finally untangling themselves. I wrote letters I never sent. I cooked meals I actually wanted to eat. I read poems out loud to the waves and didn't care how insane I looked. And slowly, something happened that I didn't expect. I started feeling human again. Not like the version of me who begged for attention in his own house. Not the man who whispered questions into pillows because he didn't want to hear the answers. But someone new, stronger, calmer, free. Weeks passed. I changed my number, deleted social media, cut the strings. I don't know if Tessa ever responded to the note. I never checked. I don't care what excuse she gave her friends. I don't care what Harlan tells our family. That part of my story is over. But the part that matters, the one where I finally come home to myself, that part is just beginning. I joined a local writing group. I told my story, not for revenge, not for pity, just to let it out of me. And to my surprise, people listened. Some cried, some nodded, some said they'd been there too. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I felt seen, understood, alive. So no, I didn't ruin their lives. I didn't post the photos or play the voice message. I didn't expose them or burn it all down. I simply left. And that was enough. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is the quiet act of walking away, not to punish them, but to finally protect you.